Joe Silvestro, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ryan. And again, thank you again for having me on. It's a real pleasure to meet you in person and have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. Let's start in the St. Ed's days, early 80s. What kind of a murderer's row were some of those teams you were part of back in the 80s for St.
Oh,
Ed's?
geez. Well, it all started at West Shore Y, to be honest with you. And then a lot of us went from West Shore Y to St. Ed's. So we had, arguably, I would say, and there'll be arguments from the Ed's community, but our 1981 team, which did not win the national championships. You talk about murderer's row. I mean, that was, my gosh, we had Pat McCarthy, we had Pat Welsh, Jim Heffron, Greg Linsky, myself, John Savetic, Greg Wright was on that team. Brad Wright was part of that team. John Blanc, Mike Salm. I mean, we went up and down the lineup. We had, I think, on that team, and then going to 1982 when we won our first national championship against Midwest City. I can't remember how many state champs, maybe 15 between those two teams.
Wow.
I mean, in 81 we would have won the nationals, except John Blanc blew out his knee, winning, I think, like 6 or 8-0, tore his ACL, and Ferg forfeited him out when John didn't want to forfeit out, or we would have won that duel. We would lock the matchup on that mat. And unfortunately, that happened. So we saved the first national championship for my senior year.
Wow. So who was it against your junior year?
Midwest City, and then that Midwest City team was unbelievable. And they had Johnny Johnson, John LaViolette, David Rinda was on that team. I mean, they had some unbelievable wrestlers. Matter of fact, I think one of their best wrestlers, something tragic happened. He couldn't make the dual meet. So while I say we might have won it, if he's in the lineup, probably you never know. But so we had Midwest City 2 years in a row, and John LaViolette pinned Greg Linsky in 1981, and LaViolette was just an unbelievable talent. And then Greg wanted to wrestle him again, and I can't even begin to tell you the week of practice he had before he went out and beat John. So John, yeah, that was a week. I think I took a couple beatings.
And you mentioned it all started at the YMCA. What was that YMCA, and what was the connection there?
Yeah, so West Shore Y, which if you follow the Eds guys now, that's still the Y that feeds St. Ed's, right? That's where Seiko, Jeff Leonard, a lot of the guys are coaching. That still have the practices at St. Ed's now. So West Shore Y Ferg had built West Shore Y. So when I wanted to wrestle, because I thought it was professional wrestling, my dad took me to the West Shore Y program. Well, there I walk in a room, and who's in that room? Howard Ferguson, the head coach. Lino Deanna, Mike Deanna's father, is a coach. There were just a myriad of people who were great wrestlers. Matter of fact, that's where I met and started working out first time with Doug Dake, right? Because Grandpa Dake was one of the coaches.
Oh, wow.
And so we had Mr. Wright, who was coaching, right? So Greg and Brad's dad, and all these guys that were just unbelievable wrestling minds. And so we did a lot of traveling at West Shore. I mean, we would come up to Joliet and wrestle. There was a big international tournament then, and we did a lot of traveling together. We had guys who were world champions, John McNulty, John Savetic, Bubba Strauss, just to name a few. I think even Greg Wright might maybe won a world championship. That's how we were getting out and going. And so we all kind of just became friends, and we were friends with families. Mm-hmm. And so ultimately, I would say 70% of us, when we had the opportunity, when Ferg left West Shore Y, we wrestled in the CYO, the Catholic Youth League, all beating each other up, or trying to. And then we lost like Doug Dake, who lost a couple others, to the public school, because that's, the family belief. But it all started at West Shore Y, which then made St. Ed's so talented. And then obviously, as you start to do well, people notice, and then they start, they want to go be a part of it.
And so was Howard Ferguson the youth coach and the high school coach, like double duty?
Nope, he did youth first, Then he went to St. Ed's.
Okay.
Okay. And so Ferg was, such an important part of my life because my mom was his vice president. So she did a lot of work with him in his business ventures. And so I was always around the house working or doing odds and end jobs that he'd have me do. He was, more than a wrestling coach for sure to all of us.
And that's just a name that you talk about, that guy in Ohio. That's like one of the all-time legends.
He's a legend. Mike Milkovich, another legend, right? I mean, he's some of these families, but Ferg for sure. Ferg wrote the book The Edge. I'm sure you've seen it, Ryan. If you
I
haven't,
haven't seen that one. No.
oh, you got to get it. It's
I'm writing it down.
Yep. See if you can find one on Amazon. And if you can't find one, let me know. But the book is a sports motivational book. Uh, you know, John Savetic and I had to go to New York City to go pick out photos for the book. He wanted very specific photos. It is something as a wrestler you should read. It is an unbelievable book.
Wow. And for everyone who's listening who may not be able to see it or have it, what are some of the main lessons or some of the main takeaways that you remember?
Think about every celebrity in the world that was in athletics, and they give talks about what it takes to be great, what it takes for perfect practice, what it takes to be, even humble in victory, right? Or grateful in defeat. It's just an unbelievable book, Ryan. It's probably, I don't know, a couple hundred pages. You know, it's one you should definitely have. I use it every year with the guys.
Wow. Yeah, I'm gonna get it after this call. I love sports psych and mindset books. In fact, if you looked at my library, you'd probably think I'm having a mental breakdown. It's all self-help.
Yeah, you know what though? It means a lot, especially in today. I mean, it's helped me coaching. Especially with the different generations, right? I mean, this is my 35th year coaching, so it's you know I'm getting up there. So trying to relate to some of the young guys when I go walking in a room with gray hair, they're like, "Who's this guy?"
And so, man, so this guy was an innovator, and that's the room that your father brought you to. Was your dad an athlete?
No, he was a bowler and a golfer. He was an artist. Um, but no, he was very soft. My father, very soft spoken. My mom, more of the disciplinarian type, so I got both from them. But my dad just said, "Hey, if you want to go, I'm going to take you to West Shore Y. Here's the deal. You can't quit. So you want it. You, if you say yes after one practice, you're not allowed to quit." And so I had a rough first year. And I got first match, I got pinned by Greg Wright in 15 seconds. I, you know, and but then we just developed, like I said, friends that you carry through the rest of your life. I mean, Jim Heffernan, right, he's one of the enemies at St. Richard's, and we were St. Raphael's. We had the Heffernans, and when we were on this other team with St. Raphael's, we weren't near as good as St. Richard's because they had the McFarlands too. So you had McFarland's and Heffernans. You got Joe McFarland and his brothers, and you got all the Heffernans on St. Richard's. We weren't going to beat them, but you grow up competing against each other, and then you ultimately become teammates.
Man, Ohio was not even Ohio, but just Cleveland was loaded back then.
Oh, Cleveland was loaded. I mean, and so many good kids. I mean, you can't even. In the '80s, it was, I don't know, 10 out of the 13 state championships might be, out of Cleveland. That was funny when you asked me to be on this. I was thinking of a couple, situations where my mind was blown when I was in high school. One was first time we ever met Jim Jordan, and Jimmy came to the St. Ed's room, and we were getting ready for a duel, an all-star meet, right? And so we're like, oh, you know, I know he's a single A guy. He won 4. I don't know how good he's going to be. We heard he was a really nice guy. All that kind of stuff. And very first practice, he goes in and takes Jim Heffernan down right away. I was like, okay, he's pretty good. He just answered that question.
So he was coming back to help out, or he was still like, what was the situation?
No, we were all seniors, juniors or seniors in high school. We're getting ready for an all-star meet. I can't remember who we were wrestling. Maybe Michigan or Pennsylvania. And so, we all got an opportunity to work out with each other, before the meet. So, but that's when I was like, okay, yeah, Jimmy's really good.
Wow. Yeah, I noticed that he was in some of the like the articles and whatnot from that day, and it's like, man, he's in there too. So what was the what was kind of the perception of him before that?
We didn't really know much because there's no internet, and so you're not even wrestling in the same tournaments. So it was more rumors and asking people if he was good or, you know, the biggest thing in Cleveland is we all worked out at Howard Ferguson's house.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, Ferg was, obviously he was a multimillionaire. He had a beautiful house and we all went in his basement and worked out. It was open all the time. And so, of the guys who we worked out with, say an hour radius, we were all talking about who's this Jim Jordan and Jeff Jordan and are they any good? They're in single A. In those days, Mark Zimmer, if you ever heard that name, Mark Zimmer was a four-time state champion in 2A. We weren't sure Zimmer. We found out later how good Zimmer was. We found out pretty quick when Jimmy showed up and he was that good. We knew Jeff was good. And so it kind of changed our whole mindset.
Yeah,
With
no,
single A guys.
I heard that name when I had Luke Fickle on.
Oh yeah,
And yeah,
I didn't hear Luke's. Okay.
yeah, he's he was obviously, his wrestling background in Ohio, and he said that, he watched Zimmer win four, I believe it was, and
Yeah, it was.
really inspired him, and he didn't get four, but pretty darn good wrestler in his own right.
I think Luke is to this day arguably one of the three best heavyweights I've ever seen us.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
I could tell you, I coached a state champion by the name of Stefan Tarabenek, who went to Kent State. And Stefan was very good in his own right. And I thought we might be able to kind of compete, like let's keep it close and see what happens in the third period. And Luke just was a man. I mean, I've never seen, certainly in Ohio, he was the best I ever saw.
Man, and imagine him and Mike Vrabel as roommates and teammates their freshman year at college. Must have been a crazy environment.
What's so funny is that my impression of Luke's always been like I'm obviously very intense, but he's a nice guy, like laid back type of guy. And I look at Vrabel, and again, my impression is only having seen him play, and then obviously I watch him coach. I'm like, man, this guy's like super intense. I wonder what they were like as roommates. Like
Right.
did they was it like a marriage or did Vrabel going, come on, Fickle, you could swear once or twice, like
I know it'd be interesting to see. And I was going to ask you the same thing about your roommate. When did you move in with Rob Cole?
yeah. So Rob and I lived together for 3 years at Carolina. So our first go when I transferred from William and Mary into North Carolina, and Rob showed up as a freshman, and we as Coach Lamb will always does, he puts potential starter against a freshman, and I can't remember how long we wrestled each other. I couldn't get a takedown. He couldn't get a takedown. He wasn't that great on his feet at that point. And I couldn't finish on him because his hips were so crazy good. And so we had like a little rivalry for a little bit, and then just became great friends. And then also Lenny Bernstein. Remember Lenny
Mm-hmm.
coached at Virginia? Lenny joined us as well. So, and then Al Palacio, Dylan's uncle, was one of our roommates as well. So yeah, we had a pretty interesting crowd in that apartment.
Man, that is a crew right there. How did you end up at UNC from William and Mary?
Uh, I when I went to William and Mary, it was coming off of. So I won a state championship and then lost the state championship. So when I lost, the St. John Arena went crazy, and I was like, I don't think I want pressure anymore. I wanted to be an attorney. William and Mary was a great school, great opportunity for myself and my family, right, for scholarship. Um, and I went to the first tournament, and Coach Lamb saw me. And what's funny is he didn't recruit me in high school. When he was recruiting in high school, he recruited Greg Olinsky and Jim Heffernan. But he came and saw me and said, I'm not going to recruit you. I want you to know, but it's no disrespect to you. I just don't have any money to give you, because at that time he had Jan Michaels and Bill Gaffney, who were both All-Americans. Both were in that lineup and didn't have a spot for me. And when I saw him, I said, hey, Coach, how you doing? And he's like, you're at William and Mary? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, how's it going? I go, it's going. And he goes, well, okay. Where I'm at, kind of like a,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, yeah. So, I made the decision over Christmas break to leave, and at the end, after the first full year, and called Coach Lamb, and he got me on a recruiting visit, and took a couple other recruiting visits, and I just fell in love. Fell in love
with Coach Lamb or with Chapel Hill.
I would say Lamb was obviously a great salesman, right? He is a great salesman, and I liked his vision. I fell in love with Chapel Hill. I mean, I had there was a couple of guys there, but I mentioned Bill Gaffney, right? And Tim Plott. Tim Plott was from Bay, wrestled with me at West Shore Y, went to Bay High School with Mike Deanna and those guys. And Tim was down at North Carolina, so on my recruiting trip, I got to hang out with Tim and Bill and Jan, and then they took me to the usual trips. We went to baseball game. I love to play golf, so they took me to the golf course. I got to meet a couple of the golfers, who were all super guys too. So at that time I could play. Now I can't.
Now you mentioned something that I forgot to ask you about. Your junior year, you win it. And in the semis, you wrestled the guy who you wrestled your senior year, correct?
Right. I wrestled Todd Derbyshire.
So
talented, really, really good guy.
How did that match go your junior year?
I won 7-6. It was another great match. I mean, he was just so big. It's funny. That's the only. I remember Todd being just really a bigger guy for the weight than myself. And then senior year, it didn't go well. It was kind of a crazy situation. We were both in cradles. He got the points. I thought while I was in the middle of the situation, I was scoring the points. And when I didn't, I just snapped. I mean, it's, and I ultimately got just beat up and pinned, and that was the end of that.
Before the match, were you feeling something that was off, or were you feeling really good before the match?
No, I felt really good. I just came off of 3 pins. I felt really good. I mean, I was really confident. I think, it's funny. You sit here and you go, well, what was different? My junior year, I visualized winning that tournament like every day. Every night I would be in my parents' living room and just circling, getting in a stance, doing stance drills. And I didn't do the same amount of work my senior year. You know what I mean? So when I tell the boys, the loss made me a better coach, right? And I tell the boys, look, one, give the guy a lot of credit, right? He came out, he wanted to beat me really bad from the year before. And, so one, you got to give him a lot of credit. And, but second of all, I didn't do the same preparation as I did the year before.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a situation where last year Vito was in a situation where I thought he was getting back points. I thought maybe he thought he was getting back points, and it turns out the other guy was, and he couldn't come back from it. So, yeah, it just sounds like
funny that reminded me of our match a little bit because it was a similar situation.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Well, and everything you read about it, it was like a big upset of not even a big upset. I mean, just a huge moment. I mean, a really big moment. So for you, how did you process that and kind of move forward that summer? Or was it something that ate at you?
What's funny is I never thought, like, I walked into that match thinking it was going to be a hell of a match. I mean, I never once thought I was favored. It's like one of those where you're like, hey, I know he's good. I'm going to have to wrestle hard. And so to say, I wouldn't even call it an upset, but when I processed it, it was you sit back and you go, okay, in the end, what's the worst thing that happened is that, like, Iowa stopped recruiting me. That was like, okay, so I never heard from Iowa again. I get it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I took when I actually sat back and talked to Ferg and a couple of other great coaches we had, Brian Millick and some others, Larry Tusick, and I'm like, you know what? It is what it is. It's part of the sport. Somehow I'm going to have to process it to use it one day as a learning so that I can help others not have that same situation happen to them. Because I got to tell you, making the state finals is awesome. Taking second sucks. And I tell everybody, you won't appreciate second till years later.
Yeah. And like you said, your role now at Marmion, I'm sure you use it all the time. Like, the week before the boys head down to Champaign, I'm sure the story comes out every year.
Yeah, I talk about that. I talk about Ben Hatta, if you know Ben.
Yeah. Tell me about
Yeah.
him. Tell me about the
So
story.
Ben Hatta, when I was coaching at Eds, he had a unbelievable senior year with guys that are just really good in his weight. And he was kind of stoic and never really jacked up like too much. And Ben, the week of the state tournament, he comes in. He has the bracket in his hands on Monday, and he comes in and he's jumping around. He goes, "Hey, coach, guess what?" I go, "What?" He goes, "I'm going to win the state championship Saturday." He had the bracket filled out. I'm like, "Wow, all right, Ben." Well, he went on, and if you know the Jane family, Eddie Jane or Mark Jane, he went in and listen. Eddie Jane was unbelievable 3-time state champion, but Ben was always respectful of Eddie and didn't ever really like try to beat him up in the room. For 2 days, Ben beat Eddie, and Eddie was starting to question himself because he's 2-time state champion. He was going to have to beat Sonny Marchetti in the finals, and he knew
Oof.
that. And I'm trying to keep those two together. I'm like, well, I think Ben's going to win it. And then he goes and beats a guy by the name of Adam Plouse in the finals. They had gone back and forth, and Adam's a legend for Walsh Jesuit. But I tell the boys the story. Ben beat 4 guys, I believe, 3 or 4 that beat him during the year. But on
Wow.
Monday, he told me he was going to win it, and he wrestled lights out, no fear. And so I always tell our boys, look, you can't win a state championship if you're not in the tournament. I don't care what you take at sectionals. I really don't. But you got to be in the tournament to be able to win it. So we don't try to get ourselves crazy, peak for a sectional situation. We try to obviously be good enough to qualify, but we're not sitting there going, okay, we took 4th, we can't win it. If we take 4th, we can win it.
Yeah, and like you said, Ben Hatta is such a cool customer, like just one of the chillest, coolest dudes you ever meet. And for him to be that forward with it had to be like, wow.
I was shocked. I was like, where's this kid been all year? Like, I mean, it's not like Roger Chandler, right? Who was, I mean, he was ready for fire and brimstone all the time, right? Ben was always like, why don't you chill a little bit? We don't, you know. So
So when did you coach at St. Ed's?
I was there when after Ferg died. So I was there from 90 to 94. So we moved here to Chicago in 94.
Got
So
it.
yeah, it was um, when Ferg died, Coach Urbis had Dave Rowan as an assistant coach. And then Dave, I think, decided to go do something else. And, somehow we connected, and John Heffernan and I came back to Eds then in 90. And, obviously, it was a very tough time with Ferg dying. I mean, Coach Urbis is a legend, but he was a football coach. He didn't know anything about wrestling. So when Ferg grabbed him to be the freshman wrestling coach, at first he was like, no, no, no. And Ferg's like, no, I love this guy. He was great. So he was my freshman football coach. His first year at Eds was my freshman year. So, and he's still there. He's still, I just saw him recently. So he's still helping tutor, even though he's not, coaching full time. He's still involved.
That's such a clutch move to have the freshman wrestling coach be a football coach. That's just
Isn't
a
it?
a
It's
guaranteed
awesome.
pipeline. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's a no-brainer. So you said something earlier I've never heard before. So Coach Ferguson was a multimillionaire.
Yes.
What do you do?
So so Ferg was the first person to take apartments and turn them into condominiums. And he did it in Florida, believe it or not, in a place called Longboat Key. And so he started there, and then he expanded into Cleveland. And so he would take a building, and take the apartment, refurbish the whole thing, turn it into a nice condominium, and then sell those condominiums. And so that's how he made his living.
Wow, man.
Yeah,
So he's an entrepreneur. He's building one of the best programs of all time, and then out of nowhere he passed away, or did people know it was coming?
yeah, yeah. No, it was 9 days before my wedding, so it was crazy. He had a heart attack, He was having some heart issues, and he was supposed to be getting it checked. Um, and again, I don't know if he was getting it checked, what happened, but he was playing volleyball and dropped dead of a heart attack. So, like I said, it was the craziest time. We buried him at St. John's Cathedral, and a week later, I'm getting married at the same place. So,
Whoa.
and a lot of the same people were at the funeral that were at the wedding. So, matter of fact, I started crying. Cole was my best man at the time, and he's like, I was his best man when he got married, and then he's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "I'm just having a hard time keeping this together." And typical Rob fashion, he was like, "Okay, well, you just need to toughen up. I mean, this is your day, not." Well, the guy get it.
But I mean, that's obviously meant that much to all you guys.
He was a legend. Yeah, and I mean, here's a guy who I blow my knee out my senior year, and I get in one of those Instagram the comes through the mail, but it's a what is it? It's a telegram, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And his comment was, "You're still still good enough to be an All-American on one leg. Don't ever forget that." I mean, just he did it to everybody all the time. I mean, I would get letters from him. I bet I got him 6 letters a year during wrestling season through college every season. I don't know who else he sent them to, but I mean, I'm sure he sent them to everybody.
He sounds like one of those guys, and there's like a very select few people who have this reputation, but like everyone who knows him felt like they were the most important person to him. Like he's sending letters to you, he's making you feel super special, and like you said, there's probably 20 other wrestlers who had the same thing happen to him.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I mean, it was, here's a guy who gives me, why in the world would he give me his wedding gift early? He gave me the wedding gift. I didn't even get a chance to say thank you other than when he handed me the card. I said thank you. I didn't even open it, and, you know, literally, I think he passed away like the second day after I opened the card, and I hadn't even had a chance to see him in person to tell him. I mean, that was one of the things that really hit you the most. Like I was like, I worked for him every summer, right? At
Mm-hmm.
doing the apartments, or Coach Urbis was my boss, right? We were cleaning blinds at these facilities. I mean, all summer long, and he just meant so much to us, that it was. There's still a void. To be honest with you, I still talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I'm frustrated with a situation, or if I'm not getting through to somebody on an academics, with a wrestler, I'll be like, Ferg, you got to send me some signs. I need to
Wow.
think this through.
And so that happens. You come back to St. Ed's, and you mentioned a name earlier that people mention as like a terrifying individual, like Sony Marchetti. Like this guy was I never seen him wrestle, and I
I'll,
feel
I'll
like I
send you.
have.
I'll send you a clip. I'll send you a clip.
Tell me about this guy.
So Sonny was Alan Freed. Sonny was Ben Whitford. I mean, freshman phenom. Wrestled out of North Canton, who's, our rival as well. But matter of fact, the gentleman I beat my junior year was from North Canton, Burke Sesson, another great guy. So North Canton we're very aware of that team, right? So we know they got Sonny. We knew where he wrestled when he was a youth. He goes out and wrestles Eddie Jane in the finals of, I think the Alliance tournament. We're wrestling against him. And Sonny literally takes Eddie down, picks him up, and drops him on his head. I mean, drops him on his head. you know, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm never that guy who gets mad on a slam. I was like, well, okay. They call the slam, and I don't know how bad Eddie is. And all of a sudden, I look down, and Eddie is like, he's seeing stars, right? So there's no way the trainer's going to let him wrestle. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the way it was. And, Sonny went on to beat up everybody up until that state finals match. I mean, so he's just a phenom. And I know he's coaching now. I think he's coaching at Lake Erie College,
Okay. No,
I think. Or no, Notre Dame College in Ohio,
Division
I believe.
two.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did he end up at Walsh?
Well, yeah, East Side kid. Um,
So he transferred though, or did he start at Walsh?
No, he was from that Akron area. So he started at Walsh. Yeah.
Okay.
And those teams were really good. I mean, I didn't realize it. I'm in a documentary that Ben Hatta's doing, and Ben I didn't realize that Walsh Jesuit and St. Ed's were ranked #1 in the country 10 years in a row.
Wow, that's
in
crazy.
Right in the 90s. How is that possible that two schools in one area are both ranked? And there's some unbelievable wrestling out there, right? So Bill
Mm-hmm.
Barger started that Walsh program. I mean, when we started Marmion, I was like, we just want to be the little cousins of St. Ed's. If we could just be the little cousins of St. Ed's, we'll have done really well.
Right. Tell me what was like what was the environment like when St. Ed's and Walsh wrestled back in those days?
You needed 2-3 police officers, fights in the stands. I mean, listen, we were talking about this too, and Akron's a tough area, right? St. Ed's was, even though it's in Cleveland, Lakewood, Cleveland, it's in a tough area, but the kids at Ed's we were like tennis players compared to wrestlers, if you know what I mean. We were,
Yeah.
the Walsh Jesuit guys would make fun of us and say we're dorks, and we'd say you're punks, and so even from a coaching standpoint, we wanted to kill each other. I mean, I could hug Bill Barger, but I'll tell you one thing: cross that line, I want and all of us feel the same way. Coach Urbis would never say it, ever, because he's so respectful and he's such a wonderful person. I guess I'm knocking myself down a little bit, but I have no problem telling him I want to kill you, and then we'll be friends afterwards.
Were they in the same division as you guys at State? Like 1A,
Yeah,
2A?
they were. Yeah. So they were 3A. And like I said, we lost them, and then all of a sudden we started coming back, started beating them again. And that made the rivalry even better, right? But they had so many good kids on that team. I mean, it just
Wow.
it was nice to go back for the documentary because you get a chance to relive some of those thoughts, and then hear some of the stories about what some of those guys were saying about us. And now a few years later, we're all kind of getting along, which is nice to see.
It's going to be awesome. Ben Hatta, and he's just amazing. Foxcatcher and the
Yeah.
Kurt Angle documentary, and what he's doing with this documentary now is going to be awesome. He's just a real professional, and wrestling's lucky to have him.
This Ed's Walsh documentary is going to be really, really interesting, and I think it brings a lot of some of the stuff you were talking about with Howard Ferguson, Bill Barger type stuff, and there's some names from the past that are just unbelievable.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how do those old duels compare to the Montini Marmion duels, or are those too soon to be talking about?
Well, we just beat Montini for the first time, so I'm not so sure that it's a rivalry. You got to win for it to be a rivalry, and so I tell our guys all the time that Montini's the program and was the program for us to be able to beat, to win, but it's not a rivalry when you lose every year. So Eds and Walsh went back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not a Montini fan, so I'll respect them, but I'm not a fan. But and the problem is, and I tell the Marmion guys, I go, here's the problem: I can't get away from these colors. Montini and Walsh are the same colors. They're both that maroon and gold. So I have these nightmares.
Wow. That's well, I can't wait for that documentary, and also shout out to Jeremy Baylor. I know that's Ben's partner, and I didn't want to leave him out there. He's amazing and wrestled at Penn. So yeah, it's gonna be
absolutely.
I'll be excited to watch that. So let's get back to UNC for a little bit. So, and this is just my timeline. Was MJ there when you were there?
Yes.
Wow. Was that key that massive at the time, or not yet blown up?
He was. Yeah, he was. I mean, certainly he was good, but there were so many guys that were good. Like Kenny Smith was on the team. What's oh my God, a really cool guy, played for the Lakers.
Worthy?
Yeah, James Worthy graduated, but he would always come back for summer camps, so he got a chance to spend some time with them. Joe Wolf was a buddy of mine, so I got to know those guys a little bit. MJ not as much. I mean, one card game, but But I mean, he's a legend, right? The guy's really good. So, but there were so many good guys on the basketball team that he just kind of blended. He didn't step out like, when he walked into a place, everybody be like, oh my God, that's him. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah, no, that's of course The Last Dance. I talk about it all the time. I love that documentary and just amazing, right?
yeah, he's amazing. But Davis Love was one of his good friends, the golfer.
Mm-hmm.
So Davis was one of his good friends in college.
Got it.
So
Okay.
so yeah,
So he went there too?
Davis Love went there.
Oof.
We had Mark Love, a guy by the name of John Inman, who's won some PGA events. Jackie Nicklaus Jr. Went there. If obviously he's Mr. Nicklaus's son. He's a
Mm-hmm.
good buddy of mine at the time. Walt Weiss, the baseball player, BJ Surhoff. I mean, I go on and on.
Wow.
But a lot of great athletes, and that's not even touching like April Heinrichs, who was the women's Olympic soccer coach. Who at her time she was the best player in the world. You know what I mean? So it was a
UNC's
fun
a
time to be there.
special place, great colors. I've always, even as a kid, I was like, best uniforms in the game. It, tell me about your thoughts on like how Coach Lamb's philosophy compared to Coach Ferguson's philosophy.
Okay, so Coach Lamb was a cross country coach, and for you're trying to take me with my big legs trying to run 5 miles in under 35 minutes. He just would not tell you if you didn't make it, you didn't go home for fall break. So Ferg was a big runner too, but he kind of cut me a little more slack than what Lamb did. Both extremely driven. Okay, Lamb had that Oklahoma attitude though. I mean, man, I'll tell you what. If you had a bad match, wow, forget it. He
That's
would
what Joe
like,
Galli said. He's
yeah.
like, you were literally scared.
Oh, Joe's right, 100%. Right, and or if you did something stupid, I mean, I can tell you that the one Lamb story. He ripped me. I was wrestling a guy from Appalachian State, and I would say I was a little more. I was a rough. I was a banger, and I was a little more physical. But this guy, for whatever reason, I was mad at him, and I decided while I was pinning him to headbutt him, and I ended up getting stitches in my head. Lamb came in to the first. He yelled at me on the mat when I did it because the guy got off his back, and it was a penalty point. Then he came in the locker and he decided to rip me apart for I don't know 5 minutes because we were wrestling NC State the next day, and now I got to wrestle with this stupid Band-Aid on my head, and it's going to better not affect your performance. And you just felt like you were the biggest idiot in the world, and rightfully so. He was right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what Bill Lamb did, and I say this to him, and with great affection, he recruited people of like mindset that he knew the camaraderie of the team would be great. And he worried about the camaraderie of the team.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm still, Ryan, we're in a group of like 14 wrestlers every day texting each other. I mean, I can tell you today it was all on this. I didn't even know the game for USA versus Wales was today in the World Cup.
Oh,
And
is
we're all
it?
texting each other. It's,
Man, it's and all of you guys from that team, if you go to Coach Lamb's website that he uses for like speeches and whatnot, all of you guys had a high level of business success, and as you went
yeah,
on throughout your career, which is pretty
yeah.
cool to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that group, and certainly there's many others, right? Because he preached that to you. I mean, it was, look, he was like, you better get out in life and compete too. I don't want that just to be part of this. I mean, this is about academics. I mean, he preached it. To be honest with you, I loved football. I was, pretty good high school football player, and I loved football. I just was good at wrestling. I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
and it took care of a family need, right? Because the scholarship certainly helps, right? My parents who didn't make a lot of money, and so I look back on that and I'm like, Lamb literally put even the backups. He held them to the same standards
Hmm.
as he would any starter, and I've always appreciated that about him. And he's always so thoughtful, right? With all of us still. I mean, still, you know, Facebook messaging, and everybody wants to go get a picture with him when we're in town.
Man,
And
sounds
you got
like
to
him and
remember,
go
he had
ahead.
Metzger. He had Metzger as assistant coach for my first 2 years. Andre
Oh,
Metzger was our
wow.
assistant coach. Though I wonder what those meetings were like, because nobody's going to back down. Andre would never
Wow.
back down.
So did you guys have to wrestle Metzger?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it was
Ooh.
yeah, yeah. It was that was really tough. Matter of fact, and when Andre decided to leave, and I think because my first year of coaching was at John Carroll, and Andre was coaching at Villanova at that time. So I don't know if he left maybe the year before, but and no disrespect to Mark Manning, but when Andre left and Mark Manning came in as an assistant coach, it was a little bit of a break because Andre was just Mark was super nice, right? Andre was super nice, but he was so intense. I mean, at one time he made us run outside. It's like 15 degrees, and we weren't allowed to put sweats on or anything. He was so mad at us, kicked us out of the room, and made us go run like 3 miles.
Man, those first 2 years were hardcore.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
But I
I didn't
learned so much from Andre.
I didn't know Mark Manning was there.
Yeah, Mark's first coaching gig was at North Carolina. He was Bill's assistant.
Wow. So
So
he came from UNO right to
he
there.
did. Yeah, he did. And then we got a chance to meet his brother Tim, yeah, so I had Mark for I think I had Mark 2 years, I'm pretty sure. But we've remained good friends because of it. I mean
He's the
but Lamb was
best.
yeah, oh Mark's
Mark comes
Mark's
up, puts his hand on your shoulder. It's like just a soft touch, but he's just like just a whisper motivator. I love it.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And yeah, so it was we had I'm not kidding you when I tell you, the North Carolina experience for us was just unbelievable. In those days, they had the training table, right? Which I think they're starting to bring back for all the athletes. So we got to eat with all the athletes. So you got to know everybody, which is really cool. Like, for a while, they kind of stopped doing that. I think they said it was favoritism to athletes, but that's how everybody else can have a sorority or fraternity to meet people. The athletes, the only way to meet people is if you're sitting down eating with them,
Mm-hmm.
So, in fact, we do that with a team meal with our own Marmion team now.
Really? Like what's the routine? Like once a week or once a month
Yeah,
or?
yeah. We're trying to do it once a week. We'll see if that continues. But yeah, and we want the boys to intermingle. I want a senior to talk to a freshman, and
Mm-hmm.
make them understand what the culture is all about. Right? I mean, that's the Marmion school is so hard. I mean, it's so hard that the wrestling is the easy part.
So Marmion is such a awesome story to talk about. So the school added wrestling in like early 2000s. How did you get looped into it?
Yeah, so we were doing the youth club. So what we did was kind of started at West Shore Y out by where I live. And we had a barn, like Ferg had a barn eventually. And so we turned this barn into a, year-round wrestling facility. It's literally called the barn. It's St. Charles North Youth Wrestling, but the barn is where we work out. And so we started doing that. And I told a couple of our fathers that who were helping out, I'm like, listen, if we build this, people are going to come. And then we got to figure out where to go to high school because I didn't know any of the area. Like it's new to me. One of the fathers decided to go to Marmion and fell in love with it because it was military Catholic. And so it was a gentleman, first wrestler to go there was Nico Jimenez, and then Pat Greco because the Grecos wrestled for us, but Pat went with Nico. And after that first year, I was coaching the youth kids, and they were like, "Hey, can you come in and help?" We had a coach Brance there who was there and needed a assistant coach, and I was like, "All right, let me see if I can do this." I had my own glue company, right? So that I started with my partner. So I was like, okay, I'll work earlier in the morning, go to practice, and then follow up in the evening with everything I was doing. So that's how we started it.
And the class I'm sure people talk about all the time, or you get asked about all the time, is the 2011 guys.
Yeah.
And I kind of think about Marmion in three phases. You have that phase, and then you have the Cumbie Reynolds phase, and then
sure.
And then there's the wave that you're in now, and we'll talk about this year. But I mean, at the time, I was just kind of like getting out of wrestling, but this was like my last year involved, 2011, and I remember Whitford, Cortez, Brill, your son, Fisher, Johnny Jimenez.
Oh, right.
What the heck? Like, how did this happen? Tell us about like building this team. How did this all come together?
Yeah. So, okay, quickly, because here's what happened. So I get an email from a buddy of mine, and says, "Hey, there's the Whitfords would like to come talk to you." And Whitfords were friends with a bunch of people that I was friends with in Michigan, right? And they were like, they'd like to come talk to you. They want their son to get a good education. And they heard some things about Marmion, what you're doing, and I think it started with the Simes family. So I think the Simes may have brought something up, and then we were doing some of the tour de force with Sean Gourmet, at overtime. So they kind of heard some things that were going on. I was like, sure. So I met Pat Whitford at our Greco State tournament, and really liked them, and I was like, you sure you want to do this? This is a big move, like. And he was like, no, I think it's the right decision for our family. And I was like, okay. And so I said, well, let's give it a go. Let's get the application submitted. And we started talking to them. And, obviously they knew Bryce was coming. We had George Fisher, right? We had Angelo. We had Pat, or Little Eddie. We had Eddie Greco, Johnny Jimenez. And we had some other pretty good kids. And so we were like, okay, let's see what he does. So, of course, he submitted his application. Well, right about then, um, I'm like, I'm watching this kid wrestle. And I'm like, okay, he's like the best I've ever seen.
He was so good.
Oh,
Crazy.
and such a great kid. I mean, and so anyways,
So
so we
Cortez
get
isn't
that.
already committed at this point?
No. So then what happens is, I can't. Oh, Randy Brill said to me, there's a family from Ohio who would like to talk to you. And I'm like, from Ohio? Where are they? Who do they wrestle for? And he goes, St. Paris Graham. I'm like, oh boy, okay. Especially knowing Jeff, like, okay, I'll at least entertain it, right? So Robert Cortez sent me a great email as well, and the email was one where you just sit there and go, you know what, I can see is genuine. He's genuine. He really wants to be a part of something. So we started talking. Lo and behold, Jared then decided to come, right? So
Oof.
now we've got this team, and I think we're the only team ever to be ranked in the, I don't know what we were ranked, seventh, eighth in the country to never win a regional, because they put Montini and us in the same regional, and we lost by a half a point.
What? Even the
Yeah.
year? Oh, because in 2011, you guys had like how many individual state champs?
Was it five? I think it was
Five. Yeah, five or yeah.
four or
It's like
five. 4 or 5.
so that
Yeah.
team never. Wow, I didn't
Never
know how
won
that all went
regionals.
down.
Yeah, we
Whoa.
lost it. We lost it by a half a point to Montini. It was crazy because the regional was so vibrant. Like every one of our guys was trying to get a takedown and pin. Like I literally almost got a team point deducted because they didn't call fall. Eddie Breen had a gentleman from the home school pinned, and the ref didn't call the fall. And I went nuts on the ref. I'm like, I can't believe we're in the middle of this team race, and he was flat for 5 seconds, and you didn't call fall. And he goes, well, he wasn't pinned. I go, no, you held it. And I said, all you got to do is admit it.
Right. Right.
But
Wow. That I never so that was just an unbelievable like moment in like high school Illinois wrestling. It was just because all those guys were like national champs
oh
at
yeah,
one, all
yeah.
of
Think
them.
about the Montini team. Holy jeez, they were loaded. And
Crazy.
and matter of fact, that year, Kevon Powell beat Cortez in the sectional final, and like was laughing about it, like not in a bad way, not in a cocky way, because I saw Kevon recently and we were laughing about the whole thing. But he saw Jared throw his shoes away because Jared's like, I'm done. I'm not wrestling anymore. He was so passionate. Like he
Wow.
needed 10 minutes. So Kevon, like, I saw you grab those shoes, and he goes, I said, as soon as he threw away the shoes, I'm going to be a state champion. And then when you grabbed the shoes, I was like, oh no, man, it's going to be tough. You know,
Wow. And then Oak Park was great during this time too, right? Or was this a
Oak
little bit
Park.
after?
They're a little bit after, but they were coming on. They were coming on. So it was, who was really good at that time was Crystal Lake Central.
Oh yeah.
Because, and again, that all stemmed from, obviously they have a good high school coaching staff, but Donnie Reynolds was up at overtime running that program up there, Crystal Lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I still say Sean's vision for what he he was ahead of himself, and what because everybody's copycatted Sean now. You know what I mean? But he was.
People get sick of me bragging about Sean Bourmet. I go, that guy has made Illinois so proud though with that with overtime, and that you guys were right plugged into that the whole get go, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah, we were plugged in right from the beginning, and then I helped Sean with a couple others. We did a lot of fundraising for the Olympic athletes, but Sean's even a better person than he is a coach. I mean, you
No,
know,
no doubt.
you know, I mean, Angela did something at school I didn't like, and so I was like, hey, Sean, I'm going to tell you what Angie did. I want you to address it with him as well. And yeah, so poor Angelo had to go see Sean.
Man, that yeah, that would be an intimidating conversation, but no, he's awesome. I know we're at the top of the hour. I was gonna ask
Yeah.
you one question about Cyberbound, but if you gotta go, I'll let you run.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Perfect. So I'm in, again, people are sick to death of hearing this. I'm in enterprise tech sales and I love business. And you were a co-founder of a company, for over almost 2 decades. Like, what were some of the war stories of that? Like when you guys opened up in Germany, or just like how many hours were you logging? I mean, it must have been crazy.
Yeah, it's when you start a company from scratch, and I started with another St. Ed's guy who's, and when you start a company from scratch, it's crazy hours. I mean, I don't remember. I know we were filling glue at the factory. We were packing at the house. We were doing whatever you needed to do to make it work. It was the right opening at that time because the company that we worked for just bought a company called Loctite. It was a big, and we knew kind of how to compete against them. And so we literally Angelo was what, 3 at the time. And I told my wife, I go, look, we can do this. Obviously we're wrestling, we got a wrestling mindset, right? So I'm going to outwork everybody, and so that's what we did. We made super glue, believe it or not, for industrial applications, which then we were very fortunate to open up in Germany, and then we were, Ryan, it was tough. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we had some broke days, right?
Yeah.
And then you start on September 1st, 2001 in France, and September 11th hits, and they shut down the international banking. That was a scary time for us as well, because you couldn't get funds out of Europe at that point to send back to the United States. We had to they needed to pay bills, so we had to take our money and help them, and it was yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I would tell you that the last we weren't planning on selling, but a large multi-billion-dollar company came up to us and said, hey, we'd like to buy your business, and we were like, hey, we're not for sale, and they're like, well, maybe we can get to a psychological number where you would say yes, and so we did that song and dance, but it's a lot of hours. And wrestling taught me that, Ryan. I mean, honestly, losing the state championship taught me, like, hey, you're gonna lose. You got to fight through it. You got to wake up, not feel sorry for yourself, and go back to work.
Yeah, no, it's tried and true lessons. And let's just close down with this. This season, it's wrestling season. Great time of year. Tell us about the squad for this year.
Yeah, so we've got quite a bit of experience coming back. I don't know. The rankings right now have us at 25th. I don't know if I buy into that yet. The boys have to. We got a lot of young guys that are also behind the scenes, and we've got 8 freshmen, which I don't know if they can win their wrestle offs. I mean, one unfortunately didn't, but we've got some hammers that will be in the lineup too, and I expect good things out of our team, but it's going to be the same, right? Right now, it's us. St. Charles East has a nice team. Mount Carmel, Marist. I mean, and that's just to name 4. Who knows? We got Lockport tomorrow. So, Braden Thompson and those guys. So we'll see how that goes. But I think by the time we get to the end of the year, we've got a really hard schedule. So we start off in Iowa at a tournament, that Gable tournament. Then we go to Ironman. Then we come back, we go to Crown Point. So we'll see St. Ed's and St. Paris Graham back-to-back weekends. We'll see Crown Point. I mean, let alone who's all going to be at Ironman. I mean, the usual
that's crazy. That Dan Gable Donnybrook, that's a new tournament out there.
Yeah, they just started it last year. So we went last year. The competition's excellent. So what we felt we needed was we needed some really tough competition right away, because I think our boys need to. And I told them this, in which our coach Fitzenreiter doesn't like to hear me say it, but I'm like, you're going to lose, and then you're going to learn, because I'm seeing you make improvements with this coaching staff we have, which is a great coaching staff. I said, but you're not hand fighting enough yet. So when you go to Ironman, you're going to find out when somebody puts their fist in your mouth. What you know, we'll get tougher.
Yeah. I love that you're still coaching after all these years. Like, your son has won a state title. He's gone through, like, you've had all these waves of great wrestlers, like, and you're still there coaching. What keeps you around for it?
You know, I like giving back, right? A lot of people gave back to me, which taught me a lot. So I like to give back. I've got a little more time to do that right now. So it's fun. We have a good group of kids. I've got guys that now I've coached, like Angelo helping out, with the program this year. He hasn't done it as much. He's been really busy, but George Fisher is. Matter of fact, you remember George was a 2-time state champion, a state runner-up.
Yeah.
He just lost. I probably shouldn't say this, but I won't say who he lost to, but he lost to one of our kids on our team in a match the other day because he was out of shape. He got beat in the third period, and I went Coach Joe on him again. I'm like, Georgie, that's unacceptable. There's no, I didn't coach you to lose to a high school kid, But yeah, it's fun. It's so this group of kids really want, they like I think a little bit older guy around every now and then just to kind of help a little bit, So my role's changed, but we still help the guys get into colleges. I'll still work with them on, and the coaches on the grades, where they're at, where they want to go, and we still got all those relationships, right? A lot of those coaches are buddies of mine. So it's a phone call away.
Well, it's awesome to see that, and gets me even more excited about the high school season. Joe Silvestro, it's been an honor to have you on the podcast, my friend. Thank you so much for coming on. Any last words before we sign off?
Ryan, I just want to say thank you. I thank you what you're doing for the sport, and I love it. Just keep doing it.
Thank you very much. I hope to see you around the Illinois circuit this winter.
We'll absolutely look forward to it.
Take care.
I'll send you a picture of that book too. All right.
Please do. Yeah. Send it over.
I will. All right. Take care.
Take care.